impact. If it didn't completely eliminate it, it would certainly it would have made that number, even much smaller than what it was.
What's the life expectancy of these tanks, these storage tanks?
We have tanks in our system now over 100 years old.
And so the ones that are over 100 years old, the maintenance on those is minimal, or?
Yeah, well, in the water distribution system, these tanks will probably stay in existence, to be used in a very high flow event. They'll always be there to be called on when we do have an unusually high rain event. Mm-hmm. The expectation is over time the utilization of them will decrease for many rain events. As Memphis asked about how many times a year, we expected that they would operate about 15 or so times a year. Mm-hmm. I can't recall that we've ever reached that number since we had them all put in service. We would expect that over time that number would decrease further. But there's always an expectation that they'll stay in the system. And what they did is they eliminated the need to do even more extensive rehabilitation and replacement.
But I just wondered what cost to maintain these.
They're concrete structures for the most part. All the wastewater tanks are, other than just occasional maintenance and going inside and making sure everything's structurally sound. They're designed to last a long time. They are automatic in the way they operate. They come online. There's some pump stations associated with them, some valves and things like that. Mm-hmm. So there'll be some ongoing maintenance of those pieces of equipment.
When you added more concrete to an area, of course that increased the flow. So we handled some of that flow too, right?
Absolutely.
So have we gone to the point of educating on probably get some of these people to go to pervious type of pavement that would handle some of the water to seep through that area before we get to our tank?
Well, there's always a lot of work that needs to be done both on our side and as well as the stormwater system side. And as we go through and tighten up our system, our expectation is that water will cease to get into the system. And then, but you're always fighting against water's going to find a path, and it's going to take the path of least resistance. So as the city, they certainly are talking, and a lot of people are talking about using all these other new technologies for controlling runoff and things like that. So, there's always a chance that water will find a way to our system rather than the system it should be going to. So we have to continue to monitor TV and re-inspect and make sure that, if some new problem comes up, that we can, we will address it.
And this may not be your question, but where are we with our program with homeowners and checking the laterals?
That program sort of comes in behind this work. Once we do the mainline rehab in a neighborhood, we will go in and inspect those laterals. We'll do that within a month or two after we finished our work. And then those customers that have problems, we will notify them and sort of put them on notice that they need to do something. And, that work continues. Sometimes we'll find more numbers of defective laterals. A lot of it depends on the neighborhood, when the homes were built, the type of material that was used. Some neighborhoods we find very few of the problems because the age of those homes was, there was material used that was more durable. But it continues. It's an ongoing program, and will continue through the life of the consent decree.
Correct me if I'm wrong, because I usually am. We're finding 25 to 30%.
Typically, much higher than what we thought we would.
We thought we'd have about 10%.
Yeah, we thought initially we'd maybe find 10% defectively, but the number has been a lot higher.
I'm sorry, we still have any money left in our?
Yes. We do, and we still have that grant program and the interest-free loan program available, and customers still make use of both of those. Anything else? Well, thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, we thought we'd close with giving you an update on some of the weather impacts of today, as well as the outage we had downtown yesterday, and we're best able to do that.
Commissioners, yesterday was supposed to be a day of planning and preparation, our final day of planning and preparation for today's storm event. But just to make that a little bit more interesting, we had an outage situation we were dealing with in the midst of it yesterday as well. About 4:15 or so yesterday morning, a jumper on the 13 kV line located on a pole at Central Avenue in Magnolia failed. When it failed, our substation just down the hill from us here at the Miller's Building, the Center City substation, those sensors picked up on that failure. They tried to close the breaker that would protect the substation transformer on that circuit. That breaker failed to operate correctly, and when it failed to operate correctly, additional sensors in the substation picked up on that, and as an additional protective device, the 69 kV breaker closed or shut down the entire station. And basically when that happened, all of the customers fed out of the Center City substation were without power. That included the overhead circuits running primarily to the northeast, going through the Old City area, going a portion of the way up Broadway, up Central, and up Magnolia. And it also included an underground circuit that kind of goes along the perimeter of the Central Business District and ends up serving the City County Building, Riverview Towers, the Andrew Johnson Building, Hyatt Regency, and a couple of smaller customers. But our crews and our personnel in the Operations Center reacted as quickly as possible. They were able to do some switching and involve 3 other substations and pick up virtually all of that overhead load in about an hour and 15 minutes. The underground load was much more difficult and much more complex in order to pick that load up. And our crews and our personnel worked until about 10:15 to be able to then start pulling those customers back on the underground system, serving them out of the network substation, the substation located over off of Central, off of Cumberland Avenue. And basically between 10:15 and 10:30, we were able to get virtually all of those customers back on line in service. They worked all day yesterday and throughout the night, and again working this morning to go into the Central City substation, look at that equipment, test and operate everything to make sure they understood what had happened and how to make sure it didn't happen again, to take any corrective measures that were appropriate. And we're probably going to be in a position to put the Center City substation back in service later today. We probably won't do that though because of the weather conditions and our personnel being stretched pretty thin right now on other issues. We'll address those. We may wait until the first of the week to return it to normal operations, but it will be ready and available when the time comes, should it be necessary before then. In the midst of all that, and later yesterday afternoon, our planning group was meeting, continuing to meet to anticipate and prepare for today's storm event. We did call in some of our crews and had them reported at 5 o'clock this morning rather than 7 o'clock, which was planned staging to have those folks available depending upon when the weather report had been, when we were anticipating, based on weather reports, when the event would hit. Beginning about 7 o'clock or so this morning, we began to see some of those outages. Virtually everything being driven by the heavy weight of ice on trees and tree limbs, and a lot of limbs, as I drove in this morning, you could see that should have been arching over the lines were now laying down on those lines. So outages were occurring. We've had as many as about 10,000 customers out at any given moment today. At noon, when we came in here, we were down to about around 5,000 customers or so. That number kind of fluctuates as breakers operate throughout the day. We do have almost 50 crews working. That would include 10 contractor crews that we've got assigned to the storm restoration efforts as well. The biggest problem earlier this morning, again, was getting to those outages in some cases. In some cases that was because the roads were icy. In other cases it was because cars had been abandoned and we couldn't get down the road to get to the pole lines we needed to be at. I think that's behind us now, but it's a matter of working through the outages that we have and hopefully getting everybody back online as quickly as we can. But we do have a lot of resources out there today addressing this storm event, and we'll wrap it up as quickly as we can. Questions?
No, we appreciate that. I think I need to recognize Commissioner Simmons. announcements for a nominating committee.
Commissioners, as you know, we will elect officers at the January board meeting as required by the charter. The nominating committee met earlier today and voted to nominate the following slate of officers for 2011. For chair, Pace Robinson. For vice chair, Eston Williams. And secretary, Mark Walker. I'd like to thank Lakeisha and Tom for their service on the nominating committee.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think, is there any other business? Any commissioners have any other business?
I'd like to speak.
Okay, just a minute. Any public, anybody have any business for the board to take up? Okay, I'd like to recognize Mr. Jones there.
In 1970, Jerry Garcia and the band The Grateful Dead wrote the song Truckin'. And it includes a line that's become famous. Lately it occurs to me, what a long, strange trip it's been. And I think that is a fun and appropriate segue into honoring Roby Trotter, who is attending his last board meeting today as Senior Vice President and Chief Financial Officer of KUB. A long, strange trip is a good way to describe it, because many of us may not remember that Roby started his career with KUB when he was a tuba playing member of the Pride of the Southland Marching Band and working part-time at KUB as a switchboard operator. And after 38 years of remarkable and varied service, Roby is winding up his career today. He served, as I said, as a part-time employee on the switchboard. He later became a supervisor of the switchboard, telecommunications supervisor. He then shifted into finance and accounting, was the director of corporate services at one point, superintendent of accounts, and then in 1997 became senior VP and CFO, which I think is the last year that he made a presentation to the board. I'm wrapping up my 13th year on the board, and I can say for certain that during my career here, that Roby has always been a very steady and guiding influence to the board and to the entire organization. He's been involved in every major project that has gone on during my tenure. I think when I first started here, we were wrapping up the whole reorganization of KUB, going from, in essence, 4 separate companies to one. We relocated from the Miller's building, or excuse me, from the old headquarters down here to the Miller's building, and there were financial impacts there. There were challenges presented when the city and the PBA constructed the convention center. We had a substation that needed to be relocated, and there were issues involving that. I had forgotten until I was thinking about your career, but I guess it was 10 years ago that we were suffering through the Y2K hysteria that required some planning, and then of course the financial and other pressures brought about by the consent decree. So Roby's been involved in all sorts of things. I am told, I cannot confirm, that he personally handpicked the site for the South Knoxville Water Tower. And I have good reason to believe that yesterday's power outage at the City Council building, Roby simply flipped the switch just to let people know that a financial guy could mess with you just as good as he can. The fact is, Roby is much more than a financial guy. He's really been a big picture guy as long as he's been involved in KUB. He is, I know from talking to Mint and Bill and from own observations, he's sort of the informal ethics officer at KUB. And an awful lot of analysis to important issues here starts with what would Roby do, how would Roby approach this? And Roby, that's a legacy you leave behind. I think it's a legacy that KUB will be well served to remember after you go off into retirement. What would Roby do, how would he approach this? The best compliment I can give anybody is you're a good guy, you're a good man, and that's exactly what you are. It's been a pleasure to work with you in my 13 years, and I know that Mint and Bill and everyone else have enjoyed your association much longer than that. You're leaving behind a wonderful legacy, a well-trained staff and successors, and simply say on behalf of this board and on behalf of really every board member who's ever served during your 38 years here at KUB, we thank you, and we wish you much luck, and we will miss you. So thank you.
Here, here. Thank you very much, Tom and Roby. Good luck. Following adjournment of this meeting, a board and staff will have an informal lunch session across the halls open to the public. And I declare this meeting adjourned.